Yo guys, what's going on? It's Rose here, bringing guys a brand new video. We're here in the PBAL for the draft analysis. I am very excited for this league. I want to say a huge shout out to Aaron and Colin for giving me the invite. I participated in this league a long time ago. I have not participated in a very long time, but we are back. This is something to kind of, give us a good transition in between, things like PDD and soon to be some other stuff down the line. But yeah, very excited for this league. And with this league, we actually got the #1 pick, which is super exciting. The only issue was a lot of the mons that normally would go #1 in the draft, either I didn't want to use, got banned, or a couple of my buddies wanted to use them, and I wanted to give them a chance at using their mons that they wanted to use as well. So I didn't go with my first choice, I didn't go with my first option, but I really, I looked at it, and I just decided that this was a mod I wanted to use. But before we get into that, let's go over the rules. So there are 120 points in our budget. We can draft up to 11 Pokemon. You can draft up to 3 Terra Captains with a Terra Tax included out of the 120 point budget. A max total of 22 points for your Terra Captains. So you could draft 2 Terra Captains, for example, one at 13, one at 9 in the Terra draft board. But a mon at, at 8 points could become 13 points if you Terra it, depending on, what that mon is. Like, I know some mons like Venomoth or Chinchino, those mons were, like 6, 7, 8 points for those types of mons, but with Terra, they would be worth 13, which is the max value that we could do. So, kind of giving you guys a little bit of background on that. It is free Terra preview. If you're not familiar with that, basically it just means that you can terrestrialize into any type, any of the 19, I guess, terrestrializing types. You just have to tell your opponent when you get into the battle. There is no Last Respects, there is no Revival Blessing, and there's no Shed Tail. It is also a dry pass format, meaning you can baton pass if you want to, as long as there is no stat or substitute being passed. But without further ado, let's go into our first mon here, Gouging Fire. Very excited to use Gouging Fire. It's a mon I've wanted to use for a very long time, ever since it really came out of the DLC. It's got a lot of utility, mainly, with its Fire Dragon stab, but it gets some other moves as well. It can do a few different things. It can be a bulky set with like Dragon Tail or Roar with Burning Bulwark, Morning Sun, stuff like that. It could also be a more offensive set with like a Choice Band and just click Flare Blitz or Outrage, or its signature move Raging Fury. It can also be like a bulky setup mon with Dragon Dance. I'm still using that Morning Sun utility. Like I said, there's a handful of different things that Gouging Fire wants to do, and I'm very excited to see if I'm able to kind of put something together for it. It has very good stats all across the board. As you see, it's got 105 HP, 115 attack, 121 defense, 93 in the special defense, and 91 speed. Pretty solid all around. Obviously, the speed is a little lackluster, but with Dragon Dance, that honestly isn't that much of an issue. But yeah, very excited to use Gouging Fire, and I think I've built around Gouging Fire fairly well, and I'm excited to see what you guys think of it. Next up, we have Mew. Mew is one of those mons where in Gen 9 it fell off a cliff. Realistically, there's no way around it. When it lost reliable recovery, it kind of lost, some of the biggest things that it wants to do, whether it be like Roost Toxic, U-turn, stuff like that. But it still gets a lot of coverage. It still gets, all the different hazards, Stealth Rock Spikes, T-Spikes. It still can be a decent setup sweeper with base 100 stats across the board. It gets Taunt, it gets Thunder Wave, it gets a plethora of different moves. Like I say, it can be a Dragon Dancing set. It could also be a Nasty Plotting or Calm Mind set. There's a bunch of different things that Mew wants to do, and quite frankly, I'm excited to use it. I'm excited to see how it formats this season for me. Next up, we have Skarmory. Again, very excited to use this mon. Never actually used Skarmory before, I don't think. If I have, it's been a very long time. But similar to Mew in the fact that it does set up a ton of hazards with Stealth Rocks and Spikes. It lost Defog as well, which is a little unfortunate, considering it was one of the better defoggers in Gen 8. But it gets some cool moves. It gets, obviously it still has Roost, it has Whirlwind, it does Iron Defense Body Press frequently, so that's something that we could look into as well. It is very bulky with that 140 base defense, and 70 Spit F is not great, but it's not really meant to do that, that side of the thing anyways. Plus, most special attackers are going to be super effective on me anyway, so it really doesn't matter if I have a lower special defense stat, if most moves and mons that are going to be especially offensive are just going to be super effective on me. Next up, I wanted a little bit of speed, and I needed a ground type switch in that's fairly reliable. in comes Superior. Now I've used this in PMPL, and quite frankly, I'm excited to use it here. I think it's gonna be a little bit better with the contrary ability. That base 113 speed is very nice. 95 in both defenses, 75 in both attacking stats is not great. However, it gets a ton of setup. Leaf Storm is its most reliable setup with the contrary and the how that kind of functions. But also, if you wanted to run Overgrow, you can run Sword Stance, you can run Coil, it can do some Glare, knockoff Leech Seeds, shenanigans. Tons of different things that Superior can do, and I'm obviously very excited to use Superior. I love Superior. I think it's fairly solid, nothing special, but it is fairly good. But yeah, very excited to use Superior. I think it's going to pair pretty nicely with the mons that we've drafted so far and the rest of the mons that we have later down the board. Speaking of later down the board, next up we have Donphan, old reliable, one of, if not my most used mon in Generation 8. Absolutely adore this thing. I love Donphan. It is one of the most reliable spinners in the removers in the format. Getting access to Rapid Spin is very, very nice. Getting knockoff, Stealth Rocks, it can be a really good like choice banded set with Earthquakes or Play Roughs, Gunk Shots. I think it gets like Seed Bomb. I think it gets Counter. Like there's a ton of different things that this thing can do. It also gets Roar, which is really nice. Very solid stats across the board with 120 in attack and defense. 90 HP is pretty solid as well. It's also a pretty solid Assault Vest user. It's a very good mon that loves to run like Citrus Berries and Iapapa Berries and stuff. So plenty of different things that Donphan you can do, and I'm actually very excited to see what Donphan does in Gen 9 because I haven't used it in Gen 9, so this is going to be very exciting for me. I love Donphan, so I'm very glad to have it on my team. Next up, we have Vaporeon, which is actually my first Terra Captain. This thing is very, very solid. It's a really good Wish Passer, but it's also a pretty solid setup threat with access to Calm Mind, and that 110 special attack is nothing to scoff at whatsoever. 130 HP is amazing, and that 95 speed F makes this thing a very good special wall, which is something I needed considering my, I don't have any special walls up to this point, or any special, especially defensive mons. My defensive mon is basically Skarmory up to this point, Donphan as well, which are both, physically defensive, so I needed something that could switch into those special attacks very, very well, and as a Terra Captain, this thing is infinitely better because it is always going to be immune to water type attacks no matter what. So Terra Ground is something I can run. Terra Fire. I can run a ton of different things with this thing, with this mon, and just being able to do all of what it does with the ability to set up with Calm Line, getting access to certain moves like Alluring Voice or Shadow Ball, getting Roar as well is really nice. It's also access to Flip Turn, which is really, really good. So if I want to run it as more utility mon, then Flip Turn is something I could easily do to get slow pivots into something like Gouging Fire or Mew if it's a setup threat Superior as well. Very excited to use Vaporeon. I love this thing, and I'm very excited to use it this season. Next up, we have our second Terra Captain, Miss Magius. Very excited to use this as well. I've seen some of my buddies use Miss Magius very, very well. Getting access to Nasty Plot and just reliable setup with that, or Calm Mind. Being able to Thunder Wave or Taunt certain mons to kind of break through them a little bit easier so that they can't roost as easy. Or recover in some aspects. Base 105 and a few of its different stats, namely speed and special attack, are very, very good for this. Getting a ton of coverage between its Ghost Stabs, getting like Energy Ball and Thunderbolt and Power Gem and like all kinds of crazy stuff. So very excited to use Miss Magius. I think it's gonna be very solid. Terra Ghost Shadow Ball is very hard to switch into. And if we can find a position for this thing to click some buttons, I am very much hoping that we can do that. Next up, we have Slither Wing, which is something I needed. I needed a really good ground check, and this is one of the better ground checks in the format. Just being so bulky and resisting those hits is amazing. It's also a really good mon to kind of be just a bulky attacker. Getting access to Morning Sun, a lot, same thing with our Gouging Fire, but being able to Will-O-Wisp those mons, being able to U-turn out, get that first impression off. There's a few different things that Slither Wing wants to do. I used it in the PBA a long time ago, and I loved using it there. I think I did pretty well with it, and I'm very excited to use it here. I love Slither Wing. I think it's very, very good, and I'm excited to see how it functions alongside the rest of our team. Next up, we have Tinkaton. Yes, I know I have two Steel types, but they function a little differently. Skarmory is a little bit more of a defensive utility mod, whereas Tinkaton, it is a knockoff merchant. It is also like an item merchant because it wants to, run that air balloon pickpocket, which is something I've done in the past. It gets a ton of different moves between like Stealth Rocks, knockoff, Thunder Wave, Encore Endeavor. That's like most of the moves that you're going to be seeing on any given week. Obviously, Gigaton Hammer and Play Rough or something as well. It gets a couple of other moves, but namely like those like 6-7 moves are very, very easy for me to run in and out every week. The stats are really nothing like crazy. The SpDef is really solid. The attacking stat is not great, only at 75. It's just not very good. But it's got a decent speed tier at 94, so this is something that if I can get like a Sword Stance up with it, potentially I could start putting in some work with it. Otherwise, it's really just going to be here to facilitate things like Gouging Fire and, you know, Miss Magius as well. Next up, we have our Ghost-type switch-in. We have Quillfish here. Very excited to use Hisuian Quillfish. Toxic Spikes Taunt, you know, just a couple of moves that it wants to run. Same thing with Spikes. Very good for hazards. This is a team that I drafted. I don't usually run hazards, but I'm drafted a ton of hazard setting to force myself into using as many hazards as possible. To try and, because hazards are very important in Gen 9, and that's something I've struggled with this generation, is just getting hazards up consistently. So I'm hoping that that's something that we can do this season. Very, very bulky because of the Eviolite. The stats look a little lackluster, but you have to think that defense and special defense are boosted by 1.5 because of the Eviolite. Getting Intimidate is very, very nice. It's also a really cool mon because I've used Overquill, so I understand for the most part on how this is ran. It's very similar to how Overquill is ran. It may not be as offensive as Overquill, but still being able to Sword Stance up, potentially get those Bar Barrages. We have a lot of different options. It's also one of the few mons in Gen 9 to keep Toxic, which is really, really cool. So, easily something we could take advantage of. This thing can do a few different, things, and I'm very excited to see what Quillfish does for me this season. And last but not least, we have our final Terra Captain, Munchlax. I love Munchlax. I love Snorlax. I used Terra Snorlax in the BBR just this last season. But I love Munchlax, man. I love the Snorlax line. This is such a fat mon for... I only paid 2 points for this to get it to Terra Captain, and I think that's amazing value. It is so bulky. With that 135 HP and that 85 special defense, this is a very, very good special just tank. The 40 defense, again, is not great, but the Eviolite turns it into, I would say, what, that's about 60, I think, for the, in roughly. So, very excited to use Munchlax. I think it's very, very good, and I think if we can, use this thing correctly, which it's not very hard to do, I'm very interested to see how Munchlax functions for us this season. But yeah, guys, that is going to do it for this draft analysis. Make sure to go ahead and comment down below what you guys think of our team, and how you guys think this season is going to shake out. But otherwise, I will see you guys in the first week of the PBAL. Peace out.